Welcome to Read Your Comics, and I'm in week 12 of the Age of Apocalypse. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Daryl. I am the host of Read Your Comics, and I've been doing a real-time read-through for the 30th anniversary of the Age of Apocalypse. Each week, I am looking at the books that would have come out 30 years ago that week. We're in the last week of March, which coincides with March 1995, and this is the last bit of the third month. So this is the end of the month. We're 3/4 of the way through the whole event now. So we should start seeing more things coming together as we move towards the big finale. Before I jump into this week's issues, I just want to give a quick shout out to all the viewer support. All your likes, shares, and comments are much appreciated. And if you're new to the channel or just haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. And if you're randomly jumping in on week 12 here, be sure to hit up my playlist for all the previous weeks of the event so you can catch up to this point. I started with Legion Quest as Xavier was killed in the past and have followed the event all the way up to this point. So Gambit and his team of X-Ternals have been flung out to the far ends of space to the Shi'ar Empire. You know, all that X-Men history with the Shi'ar and X-Men, it doesn't exist in this world. So this is all like brand new, both to these characters that are in it, but also to the Shi'ar characters. They knew nothing about, Earth and the mutants and all that stuff. Or if they did know something, it was like reports back from scouts and stuff. They weren't really bothered by what was happening on, the little backwater planet of Earth. So we're thrust right into the middle of it. In the last issue, Gambit had taken on the Imperial Guard and was picked up by the Starjammers, who, instead of Corsair, is led by Deathbird. We got a different artist on this one, too. It's been Tony Daniels the first two issues. Now, Salvador Larroca is stepping in, and I'm not sure how much work he had done. I know he did a Ghost Rider run around this time, but I really don't think he was getting any long-term gigs until like 96-ish, I would say. And he would do a big long run with Chris Claremont on Fantastic Four, and then he would jump around the X-Men books quite a bit. But in this one, I don't see a lot of that style when I think of Salvador in those later 90s years. I don't really see that as much in this. I think he was trying to emulate what Tony Daniels had already been doing on this book to this point. But I still see some of his traits that, I like him as an artist. I wouldn't say he's a favorite artist, but he does a lot of things that I do like when he's on a book that I'm reading. This being one of them. He's pretty good at like technical things like ships and so forth. And this is the ship that the Starjammers are on, and this is some kind of like solar absorbing conduit mumbo jumbo that Daken, who is the ruler of the Shi'ar Empire in this universe, because the X-Men did not defeat him in the past, is using this to try to harness the M'Kron crystal. So, do you say M'Kron or M'Kron or M'Kron? I often will say it all different ways. Sometimes I'm going to say M'Kron, and sometimes I'm going to say M'Kron. So be prepared for that. So Daken is trying to use it, and that's basically what Deathbird is explaining and all of this stuff. It's this is a Fabian Nicieza book, and in this particular issue, there was a lot of this dialogue that seemed to go on for no reason, on and on. It's like, let's get to the action. We know what they're here for. They're here to steal the M'Kron crystal. Let's do that, right? But they got to talk about getting to the planet first. And so we get all these pages of them trying to, just go down to the planet. Like nothing really happens right here. And they use a transporter like Star Trek to beam themselves down, and they're greeted by some Shi'ar soldiers. Gambit is essentially like they're no different than the Infinites back home. Take them out. And that's what they do. This is one of the best looks we've seen of Sunspot, I feel like, through the whole series so far. And really, when I'm looking at this, I decided I don't like his costume redesign in this. I think he looks better when he is crackling with like Kirby spots coming off of him and stuff. And in this, he just looks he looks like a generic Image character. I've got to say. I mean, that is what I get out of this. I do like that. This is just like a black hole. And really, his whole body should be like that. His face should be like that. But they put these like tattoo face marking things on him and stuff. And it's like Wolverine and Jean Grey have that stuff, and it's never really explained other than to be different and cool, I guess. Like what these markings mean on anybody. I think even Storm has something like that. And we're gonna get a fight. A fight with a lot of words. And they don't even show the M'Kraan crystal and how big it is right here, which I think is a failing in this storytelling, because all of a sudden Gambit is up on this platform and we're like, what's he doing up here? I mean, she's just got some energy going on behind her, but we're in this like crazy alien world that could be anything, but it's the crystal. And if you're familiar with the original M'Kraan crystal storyline, they do go inside the crystal, and that's what they're doing. Now, they did talk about they could just use a shard to get into it or to take back. That's all they really need. They don't have to steal the whole thing. But they don't show the size of the whole thing here, and I think that's a failing of this particular issue. They get inside and they see Joff, and Joff seems to understand that this is a multiversal crisis. This timeline is not correct. He remembers the original X-Men, even mentions that he punched Wolverine into orbit. So what's he been doing this whole time? Just hanging out inside the crystal, not really doing anything, Pretty good shot of Strong Guy here. I mean, Salvador LaRocca is doing some pretty good things in this issue, aside from not showing the crystal for some reason. Like, I even like the way Joff looks here. We get a Blink here, not to be confused with the character Blink from the other series. I guess that's an indication that the M'Kraan crystal is hiccuping. Gladiator returns, and he is mad, as usual, when he makes his return. Last time we saw him in the previous issue, I thought he was turning to crystal, along with Richter here, but I guess he escaped somehow. Again, LaRocca doing a nice shot of Gladiator. Richter, who's played like such a small role in this series. I mean, there's things about this particular series that have felt useless. Richter jumping in with them and following them is one of them. Other than that he put a tracker on one of them somehow, that's like, such like a MacGuffin thing to do, I guess. Or because when did he do that? It's just kind of, it's his part of this story has been useless to this point. Get some nice pages of Deathbird here as they're all going into the M'Kraan crystal, and they find Leela Cheney, who had actually been kind of pulled in. And what are her powers? It's like she was a rock star. She thought she was a human, but then she had space teleportation powers. Like, what exactly was her powers? I don't know. And Daken, the ruler of the Shi'ar, he had been in there trying to tap into the power of the M'Kraan, and now he's like kind of stuck in its power. Then we get a nice page of Joff just kind of explaining the importance of the M'Kraan altogether. And this is stuff that, man, it was putting me to sleep. I'll be honest. This good looking page, but all this explanation about, maybe because I know it so well now about X-Men history, X-Men lore, all this stuff. It's so ingrained in me now that when I have to like read through all this stuff that I already know, it feels a lot more tedious. Now, when I read this as a teenager, I didn't know a ton of stuff about X-Men, like not in the depth anyway that this story tries to like, do little hints at along the way. It's wanting to do this dystopian world timeline, but also give you all the hints of the things that and how those things are different now. And because of that, I think that appeals to longer readers, but it left some newer readers a little confused. And I think for the most part, they're able to just kind of get around that, and it adds a little bit more depth and value to those people that knew what was going on. But looking back, I'm not sure that it's exactly a strength of the story. And to be fair, I have in the past given these issues to friends to read, and they've enjoyed it without knowing all the, history and lore of X-Men as a bigger picture kind of thing. So in this moment where Joff is explaining what all is wrong with the timeline, Gambit's like, Bishop was right. So yeah, we need to get back. We need to bring a piece of the M'Kraan crystal back to Magneto and set things right. And since Joff is essentially just serving as the mouthpiece to convince Gambit why they're doing this, they have to kind of fill the plot hole of like, well, if you know about this, why don't you go do it? He's like, because I'm the guardian of the crystal. It's like it's a blessing and a curse. I kind of have to stay in here. So Guardian and Sunspot are having their throwdown outside of the crystal, and earlier it showed where he wasn't, black from absorbing solar energy, but he was starting to turn white, burning white hot glow like this, and I guess he's absorbing the energies from the M'Kraan, or maybe it's where that solar thing was out in space is redirecting some energy down towards him. Again, if it's explained in here, it's because I was struggling to get through some of this stuff to like fully absorb it. There's another blink, and then we start seeing him turning to crystal. And man, the colorists got a little crazy with their photoshopping rainbow bands of color there. And Sunspot's basically saying everybody needs to get back into the crystal because I'm about to explode. Like, I can't handle all of this power. Everybody needs to get in there. Joff continues to give Gambit a little pep talk there, saying that there's more to him than meets the eye. He's got more courage and chivalry, that he wouldn't let her down, meaning, and he's, of course, Rogue. And he says, okay, so he's going to bash a little piece of the crystal to take a little shard off. The Sunspot's about to explode, and they kind of have to get Leela Cheney to use her powers that she doesn't even know how to use, that she needed some kind of amplifier for at the beginning to make this escape, and she does, but he's going to stay behind because he's concerned that if he goes with them, that he'll explode and destroy, the Earth or kill them when they arrive. So Bobby kind of sacrifices himself to hold everybody back, or just for whatever reason. He didn't really save them because the planet was going to blow up regardless, and he didn't send them back. So I don't know. So that's it for Gambit. He's got his shard of the M'Kraan, and we will see him next month as he gives it to Magneto for whatever purpose it is Magneto thinks he needs it for. Or will he? Because Magneto is clearly in a battle for his life with Apocalypse. That was the cliffhanger of the Amazing X-Men number 2 as we jump into number 3. Andy Kubert's still doing it. Fabian Nicieza still doing the writing on this one. So this last week is always K-Fabian week. Once again, we're going to start off with Magneto just kind of reminiscing about Charles. He has to do this every time he shows up. He has to reminisce about Charles. Andy Cooper's still doing the art. We only got one inker and Matt Ryan this time. I believe other issues we've had a few. Andy does a pretty cool Magneto in this. He likes doing his Willie Nelson braids pretty far. And then we have Bishop come out here, and Bishop's going to hold a wild-looking spaceship-shaped gun at Magneto, and Magneto's going to first destroy it, but then put it back together. And in the last issue, they also knew that Apocalypse was coming because his robot nanny went off with his son Charles to hide. So they're kind of waiting it out. Bishop's kind of like, yo, we don't got time for you to come out here and just, be crying over your dead friend, right? So Magneto's like, shoot over my left shoulder. And it's kind of neat. He was explaining that with his powers, he could feel the pressure in the atmosphere, whatever, crackling the energy before they finished teleporting in. And that's how he knew to like blast one as it arrived. And then the character that's leading the charge here is the Vanisher, who I believe was the character back in Seattle in X-Men Alpha, or I feel like we've seen the Vanisher before, but maybe not. Well, anyway, he says he's just there to bring the Infinites, and he's going out. He's like, that's it. I'm just dropping them off, and I'm out. And even Bishop calls him a coward. Coloring in this one a little. I like the coloring in here. Pretty good contrast going on these pages where you can kind of tell what's happening. These braids get different lengths every time. Whatever they're wanting to show, it's like, how much can these braids flip around? It's almost like the ribbons on Carol Danvers in the Weapon X issue. Yeah, and here it mentions that they saw the Vanisher back in X-Men Alpha. I thought so, that they mentioned he was the Vanisher before in that book. But it doesn't matter where the Vanisher is because Apocalypse is here, and he just comes in like a wrecking ball, throwing Bishop to the side, and looks like he's already got Magneto just knocked out from the beginning. Just came in, took Magneto out just like that. No problem. Bishop tries to put up a fight, but Apocalypse is going to use his growing powers to just smack down Bishop a little bit more. He respects his little energy blast there, but knows he's out, and of course insults him for being a gene trader and such. Look at that. That's wild looking. That's like Miss Marvel does stuff like that, right? The Kamala Khan Miss Marvel. And he's just going to slam, like the lettering on those two panels. Both Kuberts are great at layouts. They really are. They're good storytellers. I think I said it in the Weapon X issue. They take all the right lessons from their dad as far as like how to lay out and tell the story kind of without having to read it. You know, it's very clear here that Bishop's just getting beat down. Magneto's recovering a little bit, so he's going to put up a little bit of a fight. But look how big Apocalypse gets there. Man, gigantic. I mean, this is even like conveying the growing. You know, he's recovering from being hit over here. I don't know that he's recovering. Doesn't look like he was shot, though. So I don't know why he's like grabbing at his neck and smoke's coming up. But he's growing, and he just looks massive. And as he's growing, he's also threatening Magneto with his son. He knows that his son is in these like tunnels underneath the mansion, and that's where he's sent Vanisher to go take care of that. And he's going to kill his son unless basically he surrenders. So you see Magneto, knowing that Apocalypse has control of the situation here, he gives up his weapon that he was going to fire with and, you know, takes his knockout blow. So you'd think Apocalypse would just kill him right here. But if he did that, the story would be over. There's nobody else to fight Apocalypse at the end, right? And we've got to have a better fight than that for Magneto taking him on. But he thinks his son isn't safe, and he's not. Here comes Vanisher. Nanny, I guess, is going to like their little safe room. You see him like grinning in there. And Nanny has all these like weapons that pop out, these like lasers and stuff. We don't actually get to see what happens. And here's the X-Men team, the amazing X-Men team, the team that was helping the human refugees get on the Sentinels, which crossed over well with Weapon X, I would say. Now, one thing with this is I don't think they left with the ship. Didn't they teleport with Exodus to get where they were going? So unless they picked up this ship, maybe this is that Abyss's ship from the last issue. I think it is. Maybe that's what it is, because I do remember there was a big deal about Exodus learning to use his teleportation powers because the only ship that they had, Rogue's team took. So they're arriving back with a new ship. So I'm thinking after they beat Abyss, or thought they beat Abyss, that's where this ship is coming from. Of course, they go scramble to see what's going on. They realize they've been attacked. Exodus comes out like he's holding a baby, but I don't know what he's holding exactly, because they don't have baby Charles. Maybe it's part of Nanny. And they mentioned that they found Vanisher, and he's been shot down with these plasma lasers that Nanny would have only activated if Charles's life, baby Charles' life, was in trouble. And so now they have to scramble to find out what happened to him, what happened to Magneto, and so forth. Quicksilver goes off actually to visit Angel. Angel, who's having some realization that the end is coming, that there's about to be some big nuclear attack or some big attack between both Apocalypse and the humans, and time's up. It's over for him, basically. Although he's got the information already that Quicksilver needed, we need to get it quick, that they've taken Magneto to Apocalypse's citadel, and they've taken Bishop to Quebec, where he's being interrogated by the Maudry. And so now there's the conundrum of who do they go save? Do they go save Magneto, or do they go save Bishop? And here's Bishop being questioned by the Maudry, and they use the Shadow King. And the Shadow King is able to delve into his brain, and he gets kind of the same visions of the alternate timeline that Bishop carries with him. And he even remembers Charles Xavier, and he's like, oh, yes, I remember meeting him. So that story happened, I guess, which would make sense. That would have happened before meeting Magneto. And he says that he faked his defeat so that he could plan another attack later. Good splash page here. I like this whole representation right here with the Shadow King up top and the visions coming up and being ripped apart right here and everything. Looks good. Then we find Abyss. Apparently survived going into himself in the last issue. Not exactly sure how that happened. But Abyss is back, and he's a cool character. I'm glad he wasn't gone forever. I mean, his fingers look funny as they're just like little spindles of twisted ribbon. But he is back, and he realizes that the time's up for the Age of Apocalypse, and that's something Abyss just isn't going to allow. Finally, we see the X-Men team back at the mansion making their decision, and Quicksilver comes to the conclusion that basically most of them are going to have to go save Bishop. He's more integral to the plans of trying to set things right than Magneto himself is. So I think he only sends 2 people to go save Magneto or to attempt to save Magneto, while the rest of the team are going to go and try to save Bishop. And that is where we leave off at the end of the 12th week, the 3rd month of the Age of Apocalypse. But wait, you've been asking this whole time, what about all the other Marvel superheroes of this time period? And we have a bonus book. X Universe, not to be confused with the Alex Ross Universe X project. This was kind of a surprise book, I think, at the time. I remember it coming out and not knowing. I mean, maybe I did, because the little monthly sort of bullpen bulletins that they have in these did mention that this book was out. So I guess I knew it was coming the month it came out, but I wasn't looking at solicitations and stuff to see what was way ahead in advance. So it was kind of a surprise to me at the time. And it's appreciated because there are aspects of this world that you would think, you know what, so-and-so should still exist. Like, these characters should still exist in this world. Where are they? What are they doing? And they made this book feel a little special. It's got some, nice shiny gold foil at the top, and it's got more of like a cardstock cover too. So they went a little extra mile to make this book a little special. I think it's a little thicker too. Clearly, we've got the Hulk right here. Maybe we think this is Doctor Doom by the look of him, but why isn't he wearing a mask? He's got a scar on his face. Hard to make these out down here and to know exactly who they are. They almost just look like S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. But that's the fun of this book, is like jumping into it and seeing like who are some of these characters other than the obvious Hulk, and what are their roles now? Are villains good guys all of a sudden? Like the non-mutant villains, are they going to be good guys for the humans? I mean, that's what this is kind of set out to answer. We got Scott Lobdell doing the story, Terry Cavanaugh doing the script, Carlos Pacheco as penciler, and kind of like Salvador Larroca, I don't know that Carlos Pacheco had done a whole lot of work for Marvel to this point. He got his start in the Marvel UK stuff, and he did the Bishop miniseries, which I think did come out before the Age of Apocalypse. But, still I would say for at least American fans, probably a little under the radar at this point of his career, but would go on to become one of the better talents of the later 90s and through the 2000s. I know I didn't get that Bishop series back in the day, so there's a good chance that this is probably my first encounter with him at the time. I did get a lot of that Marvel UK stuff. I don't know that I got something that he worked on necessarily. So it starts out and we get Gwen Stacy right off the bat. Now, this is before Spider-Gwen and, well, I guess the Spider clone story was probably coming out. So, there was a Gwen Stacy clone maybe running around at this point. But for the most part, to see a living and, well, somewhat well Gwen Stacy was quite the way to start out a book, right? And we find out we're in Wakanda, and it just looks like war-torn and disheveled. Much different than the Wakanda we're used to, right? I mean, there's the Black Panther statue, and even it's got like chunks off of it and stuff. People are scrounging like dirty pans for food. It looks like it's been ripped straight out of a Sally Struthers commercial. I mean, Jaco doing a good job showing like this malnourished child here, even with the distended abdomen. Gwen is, trying to help people. There's an explosion. And we get some human villains right off the bat. It just says Osborn, who I'm going to assume is Norman, and Fisk, and Arcade, and the Owl. And they are the Marauders. So instead of the Marauders being like, the mutants, we get augmented humans here who have sided with Apocalypse or tolerated to some degree. I don't know about this team. I feel like some of them are kind of shoehorned in, especially Fisk working with this group. I feel like the Wizard would have been a better choice with them wearing these like little hover boots or whatever it is that they're wearing. And we don't really get like, is this Norman or Harry Osborn? The lankiness of it makes me feel like it's Harry. So is Norman around? I don't know. Arcade's a pretty good choice for it though, especially being an X-Men series. Fisk seems to be the leader of the group, and she puts up a fight, has this old kind of machine gun, and is able to blast. She gets one blast off and it throws her back. We see Fisk still standing, and I guess it takes him out, even though it's like the blast is here. She goes back. He just says no, and then you see something falling right here, and this yellow goop falling down. So is that Fisk? Did she turn him into yellow goop? I don't know. Arcade comes up and is threatening her, but then all of a sudden this like spider thing comes in, and you're like, oh, well, is this like Peter Parker, and he's made some kind of like spider ship of some sort? And they drop these supply canisters down, which must be quite large, and we get a lot of like blood, and we get a lot of this red goopiness flying out here. So not exactly clear how that went down. You just see him saying, what the? And then these things are being dropped, and then now we don't even see it on this page. I'm going to skip ahead real quick because we don't see it for 2 pages, but Arcade was smashed by those things. But I don't think that's super clear in this. Probably because you're so distracted by this giant spider thing, and you're thinking it's, oh, Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy's there, it's Peter Parker's showing up, right? But nope, it's Clint Barton and Tony Stark are the ones piloting the spider machine. I mean, the other option would have probably been Hank Pym, I would think. But we get Tony wearing kind of like an Iron Man chest piece, but that's about it. And Clint Barton does nothing Clint Barton-wise. He's just kind of in it to be in it. Take a moment to show that they are now advertising the X-Men Omega bookend to the whole thing. This is the first ad we've seen of this. It wasn't in any of the other books I looked at before this. So here we see Tony coming out of the ship, and Gwen doesn't actually know him. She's kind of skeptical of who he is. She's heard of him, but she's not really sure. She's with Donald Blake over here, who is not Thor. Now, here's where I start questioning some things. Apocalypse did not take over until after the X-Men were formed. We saw that in the first X-Men Chronicles book, that it was kind of going along the lines of X-Men #1. Now, X-Men #1 came after some of this stuff. So why would Donald Blake have never found the hammer of Thor and become Thor? why did Tony Stark not build an Iron Man suit? He built this big arachnid thing. So in that regard, I'm kind of disappointed in what we see in this series as far as like the heroes go, because there's no reason that they wouldn't have become their alter egos to some degree, more so than they are at least displayed in this. So Tony and Donald Blake know each other, and Tony's saying that they need him back in England because this is kind of tying into the Weapon X stuff. The Human High Council in Europe is what this is all, of course, connected to. And here we go. Here we see it. Really nice 2-page spread here. The last time we saw this, we had a Sentinel crashed into it, but it was still standing. So at some point, it fell over. Now, what it's explaining in all this, too, is that Apocalypse has now sent an envoy to have peace negotiations with the humans. And it's Mikhail Rasputin, Colossus's brother, who we've heard talk of throughout the series, but we have not seen him in anything so far. So we're going to meet him in this. He's kind of the main villain of this little mini series that we're getting within the event. And along the way, we're also going to meet Susan Storm and Ben Grimm, and they quickly mention that both Reed, well, it doesn't say her husband, it just says her first love, Reed, and the burnt corpse of her baby brother, Johnny. So they've been killed. I guess they never got married. But again, why did they not become the Fantastic Four? They would have predated all the X-Men stuff. If everything was still going as it would have, there's no reason that they wouldn't have been become the Fantastic Four. So here's Mikhail. And then we kind of get some political stuff going on here. Well, first we meet Murdoch, who's Daredevil, and he has powers, and he looks almost like a Deadpool character, but he's going to be a henchman of Mikhail, and it's kind of implied that he actually got his powers via Apocalypse, showing pity on and giving him the power or whatever. So he didn't get him in the way he does in the main universe. And they say that there's some kind of the boy, they're overtaxing the boy. There's mention of Weapon X connections here with the Human High Council, saying that their navigation systems were sabotaged. Unless that was mentioned in that Human High Council meeting, I don't remember that from Weapon X number 3. And then again, they mention it here, the Human High Council having their meeting from Weapon X number 3. I like this airship here. It's kind of like a biplane, like a World War I biplane, but mixed with some modern technology at the same time. Big explosion page. When I was reading this, I kind of felt like this was a cheat page. So like, save some time, just do one big explosion with some lettering right in the middle of the page. Here we get like an action pose of Ben and Sue, powerless Ben and Sue coming out. And they encounter the Hulk, just randomly. The Hulk is there. And I remember being pretty excited about seeing the Hulk in this because he was the Gray Hulk. At this point in time, we're well into the Professor Hulk era. And being a big Gray Hulk fan, I was excited to see a version of the Gray Hulk. Pacheco does a good Hulk. I like this. I like this a lot, actually. And of course, they got to take on Ben Grimm. And they don't know who he is. They don't know who this character is. It's just a monster that shows up, and they fight with it. And somehow she's able to shoot his ear off, which is crazy. And it makes him retreat. It makes the Hulk retreat. And what are they here for? They're here to find Dr. Bruce Banner, who they don't know is the Hulk, obviously. And when they find him, they just see that he's like in distress, taking no notice that he's wearing the same clothes as the monster, taking no notice that his ear is shot off just like the monster. They live in this world of mutants. I can't say I love that aspect of it. So they're setting up Banner and the Hulk being kind of a Trojan horse or a chaos agent within their ranks. They need Banner, and Banner wants to help, but Banner's also hiding the secret that he turns into a monster. Now we finally get to see Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom, who says he's a colonel or something. And I can't say I love that aspect of it either. Doom would still be Doom. Doom would still have had the mask on. Doom would still be leader of Latveria. Doom would be fighting against Apocalypse on his own and trying to rally troops that would be beneath him. So I don't love what they do with Victor Von Doom in this. This seems out of character, even in this world that we're living in. Really odd here that all of these humans are yelling, Mikhail, 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 like they're cheering for this agent of Apocalypse that's coming to see him. But as he invites these humans, the ones we've been following through the story, he invites them into the ship where they're supposed to discuss peace. Now, Mikhail earlier too was like, the peace thing is just a farce. Like, I'm just here to kind of, delay things, make the humans not act too hastily while Apocalypse gets his forces in order. But he's going to pretend to be, inviting them on to have some peace negotiations. And they're skeptical of the whole thing too. And in fact, they're wondering why the crowd is so worked up. And it turns out they have this telepath, Empathy, who is, I guess, emotionally controlling the crowd to support Mikhail and Apocalypse. And that's kind of our cliffhanger. I don't think this is the best, most well-constructed story. While it was neat to have these characters included into the world and see what was happening with them, I don't love how they did several of them. Dr. Doom in particular. I don't understand why the Fantastic Four didn't at least get their powers, even if you want to kill off two of them. I don't understand why Donald Blake didn't become Thor. So all of that stuff still should have happened. But you could have had it happen and still have them fighting against Apocalypse. I mean, maybe they're thinking like, if these things had happened, these characters would have been able to beat Apocalypse sooner, I guess, is the only rationalization I can think of. We do get kind of a neat 2-page update of some of the characters here. T'Challa killed in action. Peter Parker was executed in a culling. It mentions Reed and Johnny being killed here. Namor killed in action. Interestingly enough, Frank Castle missing in action. So you could probably do a kind of a neat Punisher story set in the Age of Apocalypse. Doesn't seem to have been done as far as I know. So that would be kind of neat. I mean, they do revisit the Age of Apocalypse in a couple of miniseries, and they are prequels to this whole thing. So if the Punishers appeared in those, I don't know because I haven't read all of them. And then we get probably the best map we've seen. I think something like this would have been good even for the North America area. The ones we've gotten have been like little maps that they've put over here, and it's hard to read on their terribly designed, overly computer generated graphics that they've done in these series. So this one's pretty neat. Kind of gives you more of an idea of where things are, at least in Europe. So Universe X bonus book. I like the Hulk in it. That's about all I can really say about it. I like the art. I mean, Pacheco did a good job, even though some of the storytelling a little awkward. And that's the end of week 12 from the Age of Apocalypse. And we're done with the third month. We're going into the fourth. Stick around as we wrap up the story. Until then, read your comics. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my breakdown of this issue, you can support the channel by hitting subscribe. It costs you nothing and helps other comic fans find the channel. You can also visit readyourcomics.com for cool merch, like this. Read Your Comics isn't just a brand, it's a mantra. And when you wear a Read Your Comics shirt, you are helping spread the word. For more classic comics conversation, be sure to follow me on Instagram at read.your.comics. And if you're still here, why not watch one of my older videos? Here or here.